Hi, I'm State Representative Ryan Mackenzie, and welcome to another episode of Legislative Report. Today, we're at the Wildlands Conservancy, and I'm going to be talking to you about bees and the importance of our bee population here in Pennsylvania. My guest is Steve Finke, who's with the Lehigh Valley Beekeepers Association. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks, nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, ever since the bee collapse, the colony collapse that occurred in 2006, there's been a lot more attention and interest in our bee population. So maybe you can start by telling us about the overall population, the importance of it, and also a little bit about that collapse.
Yeah, of course, honeybees and other pollinators are very important to our food system. Without pollination processes going on, a lot of our fruits and a lot of our vegetables just wouldn't be able to produce fruit and food for us. So we always say that usually about 1/3 of our food on our table in any given meal is there because of pollination, or it requires pollination to have it there. So pollinators are very important for the efficiency of our food supply. So we really need them around. 2006, when colony collapse disorder was first identified, where honeybee colonies were dying very quickly en masse, it was a real wake-up call and a real problem and a real challenge to figure out why that's happening, and of course try to correct it so that our pollinators are healthy and they can do the job that we need them to do.
Absolutely. So the causes of the collapse are still unknown, but there are some key things that I think have been identified.
Yeah, in general, they have not found one particular pathogen, one virus or whatever that's causing colony collapse disorder, but everything points to several new stresses that have been affecting pollinators and honeybee colonies in the last 10 years. You know, one of them is there are some parasitic mites that were carried over from Asia in the mid-80s. And those add a lot of stress to the colonies. So beekeepers have to treat our colonies potentially, or find ways to help our honeybees survive along with the parasites, with the mites that everyone has. All bee colonies have them. So the mites are definitely add a lot of stress. The other ones are, of course, the new systemic pesticides that are in use all around in our agriculture systems and in our home use. The honeybees and the other pollinators just can't get away from a systemic pesticide that might be on the flower, in the leaves, in anything. So, and the other is just the general nutrition source. When you have huge acreages of, let's say, corn and soybeans, which we have in our area, those are like deserts to honeybees and pollinators. They don't get much nectar, they don't get much pollen from them. You know, the number of managed colonies is maybe starting to turn around, and that's because there are a lot of backyard beekeepers getting involved in it as a hobby.
Great.
And that's a great thing, and that's one thing that the Lehigh Valley Beekeepers likes to support and
So now,
emphasize.
tell me about the Beekeepers Association, how many members you have, and how somebody can get involved if they're interested.
Yeah, the Lehigh Valley Beekeepers Association has been around since 1921. It was founded, so we're coming up on our 100th year. When I joined the association in 2007, we had about 95 members, either individuals or families, and now we're almost at 300. So it's grown quite a bit, in large part because of the publicity and the things you see on the news and about the challenges of pollinators. And a lot of people just want to help, and that's a great thing. So every time we add a colony or two in the backyard, we cover another huge area. Honeybees will travel 2 miles to pollinate whatever's within 2 miles of their colony. So if we have a lot of people that have a colony or two, we're covering the landscape with pollinators, and that's a great thing.
All right. And now, Steve, you're a commercial beekeeper. How did you get started?
Well, I am now. This is my second career, if you will. But it's a hobby that just took off. You know, when you do it, I always tell people it's very addictive because you can read about honeybees and what happens in the colony and all the dynamics, but when you see it really in a colony, it's a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to get involved with. You know, you're helping the environment, You get some nice honey as a reward. You know, at the very least, it's Christmas gifts for all your family
There
and
you
friends. So it's just a lot of fun.
Great.
So,
All right, well, we're gonna head inside to the education center, and we're actually gonna see some bees in action in an observation hive.
okay.
All right.
Let's go.
Great, thank you. All right, well, Steve, we're inside the education center now, and we're able to take a look at the observation hive here. There's a lot of activity going on, so tell me what we're looking at.
Well, this is we call it an observation hive because it's a small version, by maybe 1/10 the scale of a full colony that would be outside in the wild. But it's behind glass, so we can see everything that's going on in a beehive. So it's only got a few frames, but everything that would be going on out in a regular full colony, you should be able to see in here as well. So
Great. So you got 3.5 frames here, and so when you say it's 1/10 the size, there would be 30 or so frames.
about 30 frames. One colony would fill that many frames, or need that many frames of comb to store all of their food and raise all of their babies, you know, the small bees over the course of a year.
Great. And how many bees would be in a full hive?
A full hive in August has about 60,000 bees. There's
Wow, that many.
one queen, 59,000 worker bees that do all the work. They're all females as well, and then maybe 500 or 1,000 drones. Those are the male bees in the honeybee world.
Okay. And so you mentioned the queen bee here. How do you find the queen bee in a situation like this?
Well, for the observation hive, we mark her. So she's right here. She has a little white dot on her back.
Okay.
After you're a beekeeper for a while, you don't need the mark. You can find her in a large colony. It's not easy sometimes. It's a little bit like a needle in the haystack with one bee out of 50,000 or 60,000, but we can find her. So for the observation hive, we mark her. We put a dot on her. There's actually an international color code for the queen bees. This year it's white.
Oh, okay.
So queens will survive more than 1 year. So we know by looking at her next year that she has a white dot, so she was born or she hatched in 2016.
Oh, very interesting.
So you can see her better, easier, and we also know what year she was hatched. So
Now, how many eggs does a queen bee lay?
a good queen can lay typically 1,500 eggs a day, and that's more than our body weight, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. So if our chickens did that, we'd really have a lot of eggs around, right? But,
no kidding.
but yeah, so her job is just to lay eggs all day, and she gets the support from all the other bees in there to take care of her brood and feed her and clean her.
Right.
So she just lays eggs, and that's all about keeping the colony going.
Okay.
So,
And now you mentioned again the 59,000 worker bees are female. There are roughly 1,000 drones, bees,
right.
who are male. And there's the one queen bee who's also female. How did she get designated the queen bee, and what happens if something occurs that she's no longer around?
She gets old, yeah, right. Yeah, the queens live a couple of years, so, but when there's an active queen in a colony like this, and you can see her right there, she's spreading her chemical signal with pheromones all throughout the colony, and all the bees touch each other and they touch the queen, so the colony knows there's a good queen in the colonies. So you see all this big group of bees around here. A lot of them are feeding. They're the nurse bees. They're working in the nursery. They're taking care of the eggs and larvae that the queen has laid in the last few days. But when there's a good queen in the colony, they limit the amount of food they put in the cell. And when they cap it, the cell, and it pupates, honeybees pupate like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. So the nurse bees cap the larva on about day 9 after the egg was laid, and on day 21 it hatches as an adult bee. So they limit the amount of food they put in there if there's a good queen in the colony. And so they're all females, but they don't fully develop. All their ovaries and their egg-laying equipment doesn't develop. So the queen's the only one that can lay eggs in the colony.
Steve, now you mentioned the queen bee and what can occur when she dies or something happens to the queen bee. How does that transpire?
How do they figure out who's the new queen? Yeah, we get that question a lot. So the queen's normally sending her chemical signal around the colony, but if the queen gets old or dies, then very quickly the chemical signals, the pheromone levels drop, and within maybe 12 hours the colony knows they're queenless. But without a queen, the colony won't survive. So they go into emergency mode to raise a new queen.
Okay.
And of course, all of these workers are females, so a brand new egg that she just laid this morning could become a queen if it had enough food to fully develop, physically fully develop. So as soon as the queen is gone for 12 hours, the nurse bees realize that, and they take 6 or 8 of the brand new eggs and they pack them full of food, make big peanut-shaped queen cells around the frame. And so those few larvae get all the food they can eat, so they fully develop. And the first one to hatch will walk around and find the other queen cells and scratch a hole in the side and reach in there and sting them to death.
Oh, no kidding, okay.
So now you're back to one virgin queen walking around the colony.
All right. But now she needs to be able to lay eggs, so how does she go from being the virgin queen to being able to lay eggs?
Right, so yep, she needs to be able to lay fertilized eggs. Fertilized eggs become females, and unfertilized eggs are males, become drones. So honeybees mate outside the colony because if you think about it, all of these bees in here are brothers and sisters. So you wouldn't want the new queen to mate with drones from this hive. But she'll take 2 or 3 days, 4 or 5 days of mating flights. She'll mate with typically 10 to 15 different drones. And she'll come back and collect all the semen and keep it in her abdomen, and keeps it viable for the next 2 or 3 years.
No kidding.
So once she does those weeks worth of mating flights, she comes back and she never has to leave the hive again.
Yeah.
She can lay fertilized eggs or unfertilized eggs. It's her choice for the next 2-3 years.
Okay, great. Well, so we've talked a lot about the bees themselves. Obviously, another part of this is the honey that they produce. So we can see various stages of honey production here, so maybe you can walk us through that process. Yeah,
honeybees stay alive all winter, so they need to collect and store an excess of food, and so that they have something to eat all winter when nothing's blooming outside. That's why honeybees collect nectar and turn it into honey. And so the foraging bees, the bees that are between 4 and 7 weeks old, they're constantly coming in and out of the hive, finding flowers that are blooming around within a mile or 2 of the hive. And they bring back nectar in there. They have a separate stomach. They have a honey stomach. And they bring it back and they store it in the cells. And of course, and you can see some of that down here, there's some cells that look like they have water in them, but that's really brand new nectar that's the bees have collected over the last week or so. Of course, nectar is very high water content, and honey is very thick, very thick sugar content. So the bees have to evaporate the nectar down to be thicker and thicker, and when it gets to be the thickness of honey, and the bees can sense that, that's about 18% or less of water. Then they put a wax capping on it. So you can see up in the top of this frame, this is all nectar that's been evaporated down to honey thickness, and then they put a wax capping on it. So that's just like we used to do with our canning jars, put a layer of paraffin on it and save it for the winter. The bees are doing the same thing.
So then at that point, you could, as a beekeeper, you could take that out, extract that honey, and get it to market.
Yeah, so this time of year, we count out the amount of honey that's in a hive, in a colony like this. And we all have to leave 60 or 70 pounds of honey in each colony, because that's what they need to eat between about Halloween and the end of March. When the maple trees bud, that's the first source of food in the spring. So anything more than 60 or 70 pounds, a beekeeper can take out and harvest. So we have to leave enough food for them, but they can generally make some excess. So.
Great. Well, Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with us, explain a hive to us, what the bees do, the honey production process. Really appreciate it. A lot of valuable information, and really can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today.
Well, I appreciate the time, yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
And again, I'm State Representative Ryan Mackenzie. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Legislative Report. We'll see you next time.